Imagine waking up to a world where the rules of global trade are suddenly rewritten overnight, where American imports are being swiftly replaced by goods from Canada and the EU. This isn't a scene from a dystopian movie, it's the reality of 2025. In a stunning twist, China has reoriented its trade alliances, leaving the US scrambling as aggressive tariffs upend decades of established relationships. Welcome to our deep dive into the reshaping of global commerce. In this video, we'll explore how China's strategic pivot to lean on Canadian and European markets is challenging American trade supremacy and sparking a ripple effect that touches every part of our lives. President Trump's tariff policies, designed to protect domestic industries, have instead ignited a fierce trade war that is transforming supply chains, driving up prices, and shaking the very foundation of the world economy. Stay with us as we unravel the intricate dynamics of this global economic reshuffle, reveal the far-reaching consequences of these policies, and uncover what the future might hold for both businesses and households. Buckle up, what you're about to learn could change the way you view the entire global economic landscape. At the start of 2025, the US government took bold steps to reassert control over its trade environment. In a dramatic move, the Trump administration reimposed a 10% tariff on all goods imported from China, citing national security and the need to counteract Beijing's failure to stem the illicit flow of opioid precursor chemicals. At the same time, tariffs were announced on imports from Canada and Mexico, 25% on most goods from these neighboring countries, although a lower 10% tariff was set for Canadian energy products. Despite negotiations that led to a temporary suspension of tariffs on Canada and Mexico in exchange for enhanced border security measures, the threat of escalation remains. Economic data from the first months of 2025 underscores the immediate impact. Chinese exports recorded a modest 2.3% growth, in January and February, falling significantly short of the forecasted 5% increase, while Chinese imports declined by 8.4% compared to the previous year. Analysts warned that these measures could reduce Chinese export volumes by up to 40% in the short term, costing China nearly 0.9% of its GDP. Furthermore, estimates from the Tax Foundation and Bloomberg Economics suggest that these tariffs may generate around $380 billion in additional federal revenue annually, even as they drive up consumer prices. For the average American, these new tariff policies directly impact everyday spending. Shoppers may soon notice that prices at the checkout, whether for electronics, clothing, or auto parts, are significantly higher. The ripple effects extend to essential sectors such as energy, where supply chain disruptions could lead to a notable surge in gas prices. As retailers pass on increased costs to consumers, households will be forced to adjust their budgets, making the economic impact palpable at every level. In response to the new US tariffs, China has adopted a calculated and targeted strategy. Instead of mirroring the US actions, Chinese authorities imposed a 15% tariff on US coal and liquefied natural gas (LNG), and a 10% tariff on US crude oil, agricultural machinery, and large engine cars. These retaliatory measures are designed to pressure key US sectors without causing widespread domestic disruption. Recent customs data shows an 8.4% decline in Chinese imports during the first 2 months of 2025, a clear sign that trade tensions and internal adjustments are taking their toll. Despite these challenges, Chinese policymakers remain ambitious, setting a growth target of around 5% GDP for 2025. However, many experts predict that these additional tariffs will drag down Chinese growth by approximately 0.4 to 0.5 percentage points. By diversifying its trade partnerships and reducing its reliance on US markets, China is striving to shield its economy from the worst of the US policies while still exerting pressure on American industries. For Chinese consumers and businesses, the implications are mixed. Rising tariffs on imported raw materials and components will likely drive up production costs, which companies may pass on to consumers through higher prices on finished products. As a result, ordinary households could face increased prices for electronics, clothing, and food. At the same time, China's efforts to reorient its supply chains may create opportunities in sectors such as energy and infrastructure. These initiatives could eventually lead to new job opportunities and a more resilient local economy, even as short-term price increases challenge consumers. The U.S. economy now faces a delicate balancing act amid these expansive trade policies. While the labor market has added roughly 151,000 new jobs in February 2025, analysts caution that overall GDP growth could slow by 1.5 percentage point due to the trade war. Key sectors including automotive, energy, and agriculture are particularly vulnerable. In the automotive industry, the tariffs are especially daunting. The U.S. imports a significant portion of its auto parts from Canada and Mexico, and experts estimate that these additional duties could increase production costs by up to $3 per vehicle. These increased costs will likely be passed on to consumers, leading to a rise in the price of new cars and potentially dampening demand. Similarly, the food sector is set to feel the pressure. Mexico supplies more than 60% of U.S. fresh produce, and tariffs on these imports are expected to result in higher grocery prices. Moreover, disruptions in the supply of Canadian oil and energy products could lead to a significant uptick in fuel prices. Projections suggest that gasoline prices in regions such as the Midwest might rise by as much as 50 cents per gallon, placing additional financial strain on households. Overall, American consumers are likely to face higher costs across a range of everyday goods, from automobiles and groceries to fuel and household appliances. These price increases, coupled with potential supply chain disruptions, may lead to a prolonged period of economic uncertainty and tighter household budgets. The reintroduction of tariffs and the ensuing retaliatory measures have generated significant volatility in global financial markets. Stock markets in the United States, Europe, and the United Kingdom have all been jolted by escalating trade tensions. Major indices such as the FTSE 100 DAX and CAC 40 have experienced sharp declines, while global stock indices have seen erratic swings as investors reassess risk and adjust their strategies. One immediate consequence of this uncertainty has been the dramatic surge in the U.S. dollar. As investors flock to safe haven assets, the dollar has strengthened considerably, making U.S. exports more expensive and imports cheaper. At the same time, supply chains across various sectors, from semiconductors and consumer electronics to industrial machinery, are facing unprecedented disruptions. Companies are grappling with production bottlenecks, longer lead times, and increased costs, which are expected to contribute to higher consumer prices. For everyday consumers and businesses around the world, these fluctuations in financial markets translate into tangible challenges. Higher borrowing costs mean that loans for mortgages, car purchases, and business investments might become more expensive. Small businesses, reliant on imported components, may face rising operating costs, forcing them to either reduce inventory or pass on higher prices to customers. As a result, consumers may encounter shortages or longer waiting periods for products ranging from smartphones to home appliances. Amid the trade war, countries are rethinking their economic alliances and trade strategies. Canada, for example, is taking proactive steps to mitigate the impact of U.S. tariffs by strengthening its ties with the European Union. Under agreements like the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, bilateral trade between Canada and the EU has surged by over 65% since 2017. Canadian Trade Minister Mary Ng has been actively engaging with EU officials to explore further opportunities that would diversify Canada's export portfolio and reduce its reliance on the U.S. market. Simultaneously, China is expanding its network of trade partners to reduce its dependence on U.S. markets. By shifting focus and diversifying its supply chain, Beijing is attempting to buffer its economy from further U.S. policy shifts. These strategic realignments may redefine traditional trade relationships and foster new geopolitical alliances that could shape the global economic landscape for years to come. For countries like Canada and members of the EU, these shifts offer both opportunities and challenges. In the long term, increased trade with new partners may provide better market access and more stable employment, leading to a more resilient economy. However, the transition period may bring short-term disruptions as supply chains are restructured and new trade routes are established. Consumers might eventually enjoy a wider variety of goods and potentially lower prices, but they could also face initial uncertainties and inconveniences during the adjustment period. The renewed trade war, initiated by the Trump administration's tariff policies, has set off a chain reaction that is reshaping the global economic landscape. The aggressive reimposition of tariffs on Chinese imports, coupled with steep duties threatened on goods from Canada and Mexico, has disrupted supply chains and altered international trade dynamics. As China responds with targeted retaliatory measures, global markets are experiencing unprecedented volatility, affecting everything from gasoline prices and consumer electronics to the livelihoods of workers in key industries. For the everyday consumer, these changes mean that the cost of living is likely to increase noticeably. Households may soon pay more for groceries, cars, and fuel as companies pass on higher production and import costs. In communities across the U.S., job losses and economic uncertainty may amplify political polarization and shape future elections. The shift in Canadian energy exports has significant implications for global energy security. The U.S. remains one of the world's largest energy consumers and a net exporter of oil and gas, but it still depends heavily on Canada to supply 24% of its crude oil consumption and 9% of its natural gas. This energy integration is vital for U.S. energy stability, particularly in regions like the Midwest, where refineries are specifically designed to process Canadian heavy crude oil. If Canada successfully diversifies its energy exports to the EU and Asia, the U.S. could face higher energy costs and more uncertainty regarding its energy supply. Canada's oil and natural gas help stabilize U.S. energy prices, and losing this supply could disrupt U.S. energy markets and increase reliance on more volatile sources like Venezuela or the Middle East. For American consumers, a potential reduction in Canadian energy imports could lead to higher gas prices at the pump, as the U.S. might have to look elsewhere for energy supplies, especially from regions with more geopolitical risks. This could lead to a spike in energy costs and instability in the U.S. market. Chapter 6. The role of LNG in Asia. One of the most promising areas of growth for Canada's energy exports is its liquefied natural gas LNG potential. Canada is poised to become a major LNG supplier to Asia, with 6 major LNG export projects currently under development, including the LNG Canada project in British Columbia, which will begin operations in 2023. Phase 1 of the LNG Canada export facility is nearing completion and aims to commence LNG exports by mid-2025. This initial phase is projected to have an export capacity of approximately 1.84 billion cubic feet per day (BKFDL). A proposed Phase 2 expansion could potentially double this capacity, adding an additional 1.84 BKFD, contingent upon a final investment decision. Asia's demand for natural gas is growing rapidly. China alone is expected to import 80 million metric tons (MMT) in 2025, while Japan remains one of the world's largest LNG importers. For Canadians, this means that their natural gas bills could be lower, as new trade routes could free up domestic supply. In the U.S., this could help stabilize energy costs and ensure that natural gas prices remain affordable for consumers, especially in northern states where natural gas heating is critical. Ending Canada's move to diversify its energy exports beyond the U.S. is reshaping the global energy landscape. This transition is driven by both geopolitical pressures like U.S. tariffs and the need for long-term energy security. While the U.S.-Canada relationship will remain vital, Canada's new energy export strategy to Europe and Asia presents an exciting opportunity to expand trade and strengthen global energy security. For everyday Canadians and Americans, this could mean fluctuating energy prices in the short term, but more stable and resilient energy markets in the future. As Canada's energy exports to new markets increase, we could see lower domestic energy costs and greater investment in clean and sustainable energy.